So I wonder what everybody had for second lunch.
We got to not talk about food this time as everyone's coming on. I feel like we're kind of pigeonholed ourselves.
All right, the Olympics.
Yeah.
What's up, everybody? You guys are coming back. Welcome.
Welcome.
So glad to be with you. Hope that was a beneficial session for you guys.
It's a good one, Dave. It's a good one.
That was real good.
Many thanks.
Many thanks. All right, we're just waiting a few minutes for a couple minutes early.
We were just so grateful that we could learn from your many, many failures this week, Dave, or today, Dave.
At least somebody is. I didn't.
When Jared and I do the Better Student Ministry stuff, I feel like every time we're like, now I wasn't really good at this, but...
Or if I could do this over again.
I think in the introduction to Good Kids Big Events Magic T-shirts, I kind of give that disclaimer. I kind of say, like, sometimes in sports, the best coaches weren't the greatest players. They were okay players, but they weren't like the stars. And they became good coaches. And I think I kind of said, like, I hope that's the case here, that I'm able to coach you a little bit, even though I don't know that I was the greatest player.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yep. That goes to what you were saying earlier, too, about God works often more in spite of us than because of us, right?
Yeah. Thankfully, he's much bigger than our ability to do ministry.
Yeah.
Oh, look at all them Liverpool links.
That's because you subscribed to all them.
I did.
This is NY Youth Men, so I'm assuming you did.
That is funny.
That's all that pops up under subscription.
We got another picture here from a crew.
What we got? Oh, a little waving to us. Love it. Love it. Welcome back, guys, as you're joining.
Last Q&A.
Last Q&A. If you
Final
got questions, send them in.
We can cover anything that we've gone through today, and even things that we didn't discuss today.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yep. If you got questions, text them in. Leave them in the chat. Would love to see. Just waiting a few minutes for everyone to jump in.
Mark?
You should let them know, too, that we have last year's Boost content. They can,
Well, you just said it.
well,
Let them know.
officially let them know.
Yeah. If you guys missed out, we did the similar event. Last year we had 4 different speakers, same setup, and we're working on making that available as well. And in fact, we may do some sort of a discount for anyone that participated in this, because if you did this, you have access to all this, so you can rewatch these videos. Obviously, the guides, all that stuff is yours. So if you want to redo this again, re-engage with the conversation, that'd probably be great.
And Dave has agreed to come to every one of your locations.
Everyone.
For live Q&A.
This week.
Yep. This week only.
Very generous. of
Are
you.
the Q&A sessions, have they been recorded? Are they going to be available?
They
or
are
no?
being recorded, and yeah, we'll make them available.
Oh,
Yep.
that's cool.
Yep, for sure.
We'll edit all the things out that you said
Yeah.
that were just off.
Big shout out to Mark, who did a lot of the technical work to make this happen, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
By a lot, if you mean all, then yeah.
I will say Dave made it, not that we didn't have great speakers, because we did have great speakers last year, but every one of your takes was a one take, and that was not the case with last year's speakers. So
When you preach every week, you just know no matter how bad it gets, you just got to keep going.
sometimes I just start talking, I don't know where I'm going.
Don't know how I'm finishing the sentence, and then I just land it. That's actually true. There's been times preaching where I'm like, where am I going with this sentence as I'm saying it? But, you always got the, Jesus is good, right?
Yep.
Ending.
Yeah, and everyone's like, yeah. All right.
That's awesome. We got a few people joining back in.
Hopefully they can all get home from wherever they're at. They haven't been snowed in. Although, lock-in with just adults sound like fun.
Does it?
Oh.
That sounds wild. Yeah.
Sounds better than having a bunch of teenagers at a lock-in.
We got about 8 people back. We're waiting on a bunch more, so we'll maybe give it another minute or two for those who are obviously engaged in some very robust conversation. Either that or they took a little too long on their break.
Yeah.
You tell me which is more likely. I don't know.
I'm picturing teams just shouting about metrics of how to measure their discipleship
Right.
strategies.
How dare you? I can't believe this. Those that kind of stuff. That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
Any fights break out during this time? We hope not. But Dave asked some very controversial questions, so
I like to live on the edge.
yes, you do.
By the way, Dave is also offering to personally disciple anyone that's listening today, so
Yep.
that's great.
Yep. This week.
This week only.
This week only 1 week discipleship.
Family will love me doing all this work on their winter break week.
All right, we'll just wait 1 more minute and then we'll jump in.
Okay.
It's been great. Hey, if you're back, let us know in the chat. We'd love to see you guys, interact with you. As well, just a reminder, if you've got questions based on that last session that you want us to hit, go ahead and text the number below, or you can leave them in the chat as well. I'll see both of them. So we'd love to hear from you guys. We want to make sure we're asking the questions that are meaningful to you. So go ahead and do that.
Is it possible that Dave taught so clearly that there was no confusion out on the back end?
No.
No questions needed.
Don't be ridiculous.
The opposite is possible. That it was so confusing.
Like we don't even know what to
that
ask.
people don't even know what questions to ask.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I know we'll probably have a few more jumping on as we go here, but I want to respect everybody's time. This is our final Q&A. You guys have made it through the whole day.
Nice job.
And so that deserves an applause for yourself.
I thought we were doing that.
I mean, it was figurative, but that's fine. We've seen some awesome pictures come in from you guys and some great reports already about the content and the conversation that's happened. So thankful for that. Thankful for you guys being a part of this. And we want to dive into this last topic, which is all about metrics. And I thought I'd open up the conversation with just kind of a question of why metrics in disciple making is important. Why is it an important thing to wrestle through?
Well, actually, during the break, we were talking a little bit about the Winter Olympics, and Mark and I are fans because we are committed
Olympians.
former Olympians, and committed to supporting other people's dreams and supporting global efforts to come together. Jared, on the other hand, is not a fan because he does against both of those things. But the Winter Olympics is interesting. I actually was listening to this podcast the other day. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a guy who loves sports and a guy who knows nothing about sports, and they talk about sports.
Love that.
And the guy who knows a lot about sports was just naming all the different Winter Olympic events, and the guy who knows nothing about sports is trying to guess what they are based on his limited knowledge. And Winter Olympics is more so than the Summer Olympics, I think. The Winter Olympics is that event where, like, you're not like, oh, what is that again? And you see it happening. Like, curling is obviously, like, one that people see people doing, rolling these stones across the ice and brushing. You're like, what is this? And but I enjoy the Winter Olympics. But, of course, every event, not every event, but a lot of the events have different ways of measuring who wins. And a lot of times it's just who finishes first, of course, in a race. But even the way that points are accumulated in figure skating, the ways that points are earned in curling. Like, it took me watching that for a while to understand what in the world is going on and how do they gain points and stuff. And once I understand how somebody wins at something, it gives me clarity on everything they do, right?
That's good.
And so I think similar in youth ministry, once we have some clarity as to what success might look like in the kingdom of God and what it looks like to run a healthy youth ministry that is focused on making disciples, it now informs everything else that we do. It aims us at the right target. It helps us to celebrate the right things. It prevents us from chasing after things that might be good but are not the best. And it also, just as leaders, helps us to know even how to equip our team, right? Mm-hmm. How do I train people how to play a sport if I don't know how we keep score while we're playing the sport and what matters most? So those are some of the things that come to mind. That's why I think it matters so much.
Yeah. And what's at stake is huge, right? Because we're talking about students, we're talking about knowing Jesus, their life being changed. We're also talking about all the time that you guys invest in youth ministry. Right. Like, obviously, we don't want that time to be wasted.
Yeah.
And it's possible, not that sometimes we don't do it perfectly, it's a waste, but it's possible to focus on the wrong things.
Well, sure.
And to be spending our time being not as fruitful as we could be if we were measuring the right
and not
stuff.
to overextend the metaphor you're making, but to Jared's point, like, it's very possible to be scoring the wrong things,
Yeah.
and think that you're doing really good,
Yeah.
and then realize when the game is done, wait a minute, that wasn't even what we were trying to accomplish.
Right,
Yeah.
winning at the wrong things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for you guys, as you think back on your time at youth ministry, because you're both old, you haven't done it for a long time, you don't know a lot about youth ministry anymore. But as you think back,
Maybe somewhat true.
as you guys think back, what do you think? Where did you maybe miss it in your measuring of your disciple environments, or maybe what's some things that you wish you had thought of, or maybe is there some practices that you wish you had put into place to kind of do regular assessments? How about either one of you? What would you guys do if you were to look back?
Well, I think, especially in the framework of the session that everybody just watched, relationships and responsibilities and reproduction, I'm not sure that I looked at students mostly as showing up and signing up, if I can say it that way. So were they there when we did stuff, and did they indicate interest in more things? And that's all good and important, and we want our students to show up, and we want them to sign up for the right things. But in terms of evaluating the nature of the relationships that my students had with their friends, probably the furthest I went with that was whether or not they were willing to invite their friends to show up.
Yeah.
But not enough strategic conversations about gospel friendship and what does it look like to live a life that embodies the values of the kingdom that will ultimately come head to head in conflict with the values of this world. And how do you, as a Christian teenager or follower of Jesus, how do you respond to the culture around you in a way that will make you not weird or strange or unlikable, but actually attractive and interesting because you've found some deeper truth to kind of live out of? And so I think mostly, short answer, it was just show up, sign up, and I thought that's probably what I mostly measured. And then just their response in some of the bigger moments of services and bigger moments of the events.
Yeah, I felt like I was good at the relationship piece of things, and it's probably just the way that I'm wired. I'm just wired relationally, and I would constantly be encouraging that to my team and to my staff, and even to the students, like being proactive about reminding students to go talk to a kid that's sitting by themselves, and kind of commissioning to them to do that sort of stuff. And the relationship thing was a big priority. I think I wish I would have understood or focused more on, or maybe even just articulated better the responsibility piece. Like, I would give them tasks to do, but they were things just that they were executing versus ownership, responsibility as a part of the process of discipling other people. And I think had I done better at clarifying that and explaining it, and even talking it as maybe it was happening organically, but we were kind of not aware of the obviousness of it, I think it could have helped that reproduction phase then that much more as well.
Sure.
Yeah. One of the questions that came in, and this kind of is a question that is connected to this whole day, which there's been a lot of content, right? A lot of new ideas.
How do you disciple a student?
Close, no. For a youth, a team, a leadership team, how do they keep these ideas and this culture building in their team on a regular basis? What are some things that they can do? Because obviously this is not hey, we heard it, boom, we've now all got it.
Yeah.
But how do you continue to build momentum? How do they keep some of the things we've talked about, you've talked about, David, in front of them as a youth leadership team as they leave Boost and continue to do ministry?
Let me just jump in real quick. I think one of the things you said in the Q&A of the last session, maybe one of the best things they could keep in mind is doing it amongst themselves as a team, discipling each other, encouraging one another, talking about our successes and our failures together, and as you're having those regular conversations amongst your team, that I believe the natural outflow is then to be doing it with the students as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I guess what my hope is, my prayer is for today's sessions, because I know it's a lot of content, it's a lot to process, is that today is just a start of something. It's just or a restarting of something, and a catalyst moment for future conversations. There's no way anyone's going to walk away from today with a discipleship strategy in place and a discipleship culture established. It's just not going to happen. And so, but can we start wrestling with better questions maybe than we were before today? Or can we start aiming for different things? And so one of the things I would encourage you as a team is to commit yourselves to ongoing conversations in terms of what does it look like for us to be a disciple-making youth ministry. And the reason why I'm so energized to do this specifically today for New York Youth Ministry is because you have leadership here that embraces and embodies discipleship. And so you're not going to be making this journey on your own. Pastor Jared is your leader, and he's available and accessible and one of the better strategic thinkers I know in terms of discipleship. So don't kind of go home under the weight of information and these new sense of things you got to do. Instead, be encouraged by what you're able to get out of today, 2 or 3 things, and let this go back to these videos later, go back to your booklet later, schedule more time together as a team, have more conversations, and then be sure to take advantage of the quality leader you have in Jared, but also some of the other local leaders that are closer to you in your region or in your section. And I think that would be such a big part of it. But I think one of the biggest things is, in terms of moving forward, is refusing to settle for just sort of gathering kids together and teaching them stuff and hoping that they get it.
Yeah.
I think there has to be this shift in the mentality of youth workers from I'm a chaperone or I'm a event programmer or I'm an event coordinator to I'm a disciple maker. And I'm going to give my life away for the very reasons that Jesus gave his life away, that other people might know God and serve God. And so there is this sort of, as you were mentioning, Mark, if you're going to have those disciple-making relationships with one another, there is this inconveniencing of your own life and this sort of carving up of your schedule in such a way to say, I want to exist for others. I want to see the life of Christ that's in me be poured into other people.
Yeah.
It's easiest if someone's done it for you, because then you're just doing for someone else what was done for you. But some of you even probably listening today and thinking, I'm not sure that anyone's ever done this for me. So maybe for some of you, the starting point is to go to a pastor at your church or a mature believer and say, would you be open to getting together with me once a month and having coffee and just giving me wisdom and counsel and scriptural teaching and using spiritual gifts to encourage me, and position yourself as a disciple. And then in receiving that, it might be something that's easier for you in the future to give away.
It's good.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important. And one encouragement I would give to you guys is one of the things we've learned today in this conversation and in your videos, David, is you can't disciple teenagers without adults who are committed to pouring their lives into them. And so for some of you, I know in conversations I've had, maybe your team does not look very big right now. Or actually, no matter how big your team is right now, the potential to reach students means it can be bigger and should be bigger. So one of the starting points maybe in building this culture is, hey, we gotta find more leaders who are willing to pour their life into students.
Yeah.
Our capacity to reach students depends on how many adults that we have that aren't just, to your point or your point, Mark, just going to show up, but are actually going to give their life to students and be committed for the long term. You can't overstate that, how important that is, in particular in youth ministry, because students are hard. They're hard to get into their life, and so someone who's willing to really be committed to it for the long term. And the last thing I would say with that is commit to a regular gathering of your team. Yeah. So this is a catalyst moment, hopefully. Yeah. But for me, when I was a youth pastor, it was once a month. We were gathering in my home, and we would do usually some food together. We would do a little bit of training together, and then we would just work on building relationship and spending time. So make that a part of your routine. As strong as your youth leader team is, will be connected to the strength of your youth ministry.
That's good. Yeah, and if everybody is asking these sorts of questions, then things don't just happen and accidentally and we don't realize why we're doing what we're doing. And it can be asked in such a way that it's encouraging for the whole group and not like, well, why are we doing this? This is ridiculous. This doesn't make any sense. And so knowing that the good news is, as you've said a couple times throughout this whole thing too, is it's a process. Sure. It takes time. So the good news is if you've been in youth ministry for 3+ years and you're like, I haven't done any of this stuff. Well, now you can start it, and it's not a light switch that's turned on and off as far as now all of our kids are saved. It's let's put our shoulder down and let's grind together.
And at the very least, although this is not the least, this is one of the most important things we can do. as youth leaders, you should be praying regularly for the students that God has entrusted you with and for their families. And so whatever it's going to take for you and your team to make that a part of your regular rhythm, if there's 3 or 4 students that God's placed on your heart, commit yourself. I'm going to pray for those students by name every single day. And I genuinely believe that as we begin to commit ourselves to praying for people, God gives us a heart for those individuals and even opens up opportunities for us to minister to them.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions came up about the role of events in discipling, and how do we measure the success of that? How do we decide, hey, was this good for our students? Was this we go to a youth convention or summer camp or whatever, and it's like, was that good or was that bad? How do I know? How do I measure? Give us some of your thoughts on that, because we kind of know what some of the typical measurements are. But
yeah, I think with events, and I value events, and I think they're important, and I hope all of you will be here in Syracuse Memorial Day weekend for convention, because, I look back at my spiritual journey, there are very specific moments that I remember, and they're almost always, for whatever reason, happened at larger events where there's something about getting away from where you always are and being in a focused environment with other people, having quality worship experience, singing experience, quality speaker. There just is something about the expectations of students that shifts in that environment, and that sometimes the Spirit might use to do a work in their heart. But in terms of like where events fit in a disciple-making strategy, I see them as, again, not to use the same word, being sort of catalyst moments for things that have already been happening before and are going to be shepherded and discipled afterwards. And so we would say, I remember saying as a DYD, you can't sustain a moment, but you can sustain a conversation. And so instead of just letting moments being the thing that we celebrate, oh, how good did we all feel at the end of service when we went to the altar and sang? How emotional was that when we prayed? Instead, in addition to, once you get back to your church or back to your hotel room that night, having spiritual conversations and asking students, what was the Lord speaking to your heart? What do you think your next step will be like? Because you can sustain the conversation back into the local youth ministry, but you can't sustain the moment. Moments come and go, but conversations can continue. And so seeing it in that way is sort of those mountaintop moments where God might do something significant, but not expecting it to sustain itself.
Yeah,
it won't.
I always saw our events, our retreats, convention, things like that as a tool to use for small group and one-on-one relationships. So the best way to make an event super successful is have great relationships with your students leading into an event like that. If the first time I'm having any sort of deep conversation with a student at a retreat is at that retreat, then chances are it's going to be stunted. Now, it may be more open than meeting with them for the first time on a typical large group meeting night. But if I've done the work of one-on-one or small group relationship, sharing life with these students leading up to an event, well, then it's exponentially more beneficial when we get to those. Or
use it as an opportunity to build that great relationship. Like, those events are some of the most pivotal moments for, like, I remember one year, maybe you guys can relate to this, one year going to a youth convention with a group, and these kids were just like, they were just wild, and like, it felt like, I remember looking around and seeing all these kids down at the altar raising their hands, and there was like a response time, and like not one of my kids in youth group responds.
Never experienced that.
And I'm just looking around, I'm like, oh man. But what helped me think about those moments is I then started to go into those weekends, and I would think about, like, what's the 1 or 2 kids that relationally it's just not letting me build a breakthrough with them. And I would like really go in strategically, and I would tell my leaders, like, hey, think about the one kid who you really have not been able to get through to, and use this time, like use this weekend to really have that moment. And I think that can be really powerful for those events as well.
Good.
So
Yeah.
all right, well, we're coming down to the end here. The last maybe sign off kind of question before you guys go, or before we go, and we've got one kind of final announcement about some of the resources we want to make available to you guys. But we do want to talk about, we've mentioned it before, what encouragement. Both of you were longtime youth ministry veterans. Mark, volunteer youth leader for a long time, as you were a full-time teacher before coming a youth pastor. Dave, you were a youth pastor for a long time, then DYD. What advice would you guys have for people who right now who are struggling, maybe feel like they want to quit, maybe feel like it's too difficult, they're not seeing fruit. What would you guys say to those who need some encouragement in sticking with it?
I think, it's so much of ministry is faithfulness to your own relationship with Jesus, right? So tend the garden of your heart, so to speak. And Paul is giving advice, I think, to Timothy, this young pastor, and he says, pay close attention to your life and to your doctrine, who you are and what you believe about God and what you teach to others. And so that would be my encouragement to you, is to find your deepest joy and your sense of who you are, your identity in Christ, and not even in ministry. Ministry is a really dangerous place because many people go to ministry looking to validate themselves or find a sense of who they are, prove themselves, or impress God, or impress their parents, or impress the people around them. And if you go into ministry working for approval instead of from a place of approval, it's a dangerous place to be. And so I would encourage you to pay attention to your own heart, be encouraged by that God chose you. One of the things I've had to remind myself during this crazy COVID political season, everything we've been going through as a country and as a world, is that God, in his sovereign wisdom, chose me to lead in this season. He didn't choose Abraham, Moses, Daniel, Esther, Ruth. They had their time. He chose Mark, Jared, David, all of you that are watching right now. He chose us to lead right now, and he's wise and he's sovereign. And so that means that he chose us and he knows what he's doing. It may not always feel that way, but be encouraged that God chose you, that the one who's began the work in you is faithful to complete it, that ultimately at the end of everything, we're going to rejoice together in his presence and see how his faithfulness carried us from the beginning to the end. So when you feel weak, when you don't feel faithful, remind yourself that your strength is not in your faithfulness, it's in Jesus' faithfulness to you and his faithfulness expressed through you. So be encouraged. You are making a difference. As I said in the first session, the growth may be invisible, but it's inevitable. Yeah. If we're faithful to preach the gospel and to depend on the Spirit and to commit ourselves to sharing life together, growth happens. And sometimes you see it 10 years later in youth ministry, and sometimes you see it 20 years later. But when that seed is planted, God does not forget the seed that's been planted in the hearts of the young people that you're serving. Yeah. It's a crazier world. This is a harder time. Let's be honest. This is a harder time to do youth ministry than when I did it, for a lot of reasons. True. And so I want to encourage you in what you're doing. Be faithful to what God's called you to do and trust him for the fruit.
Yeah, I think it was George Wood that said, if you're reaping, it's probably because someone else has sown. Yep. And if you're sowing but not reaping, then somebody else will have that opportunity to do so. So celebrate every small win together, right? And then, like you said, I can't say any better than you did. Recognize it's not my job. It's the Holy Spirit's job to save souls. It's my job to love teenagers and point them to Jesus. Yeah. And I can do that. And the good news is I can do that and be a flawed human being myself. And in some ways, that's part of the process.
I remember when the 72 came back from being sent out by Jesus, they came back talking about all the sick were healed, demons were cast out, all these exciting things, all these ministry things that we'd all love to put on our resume. And Jesus said, don't rejoice in that, but rejoice that your names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Yeah. And I think that's such an important message to people in ministry. Be thankful for the fruit, but don't find your deepest joy in the size of your youth ministry and even the life change that you see around you. Find your deepest joy in knowing that your names have been securely written in God's book of life because of what Jesus has accomplished for you.
Yeah, that's great. And our hope for my role as the youth director, my family, Jen, my kids, Judah and Charlotte, man, our hope is to love and serve you guys in what you're doing and support you. We pray for you guys. We believe in you. Everything that we try to do in our department is to get behind the local church and our local church youth ministries. And so you all have my number now. It's up there. That's my personal cell phone number. So
any time of day or night,
especially when he's on vacation next week, him and his family would appreciate lots of.
I'm not afraid to put it on mute or not answer until I get back from vacation.
That's true.
But yeah, we're here for you. We want to continue and encourage you guys in this pursuit of discipling teenagers. And so one of the ways that we already do that in the department is we really value resourcing our youth ministries. And so you may not be aware, but we produce two resources out of this department. So one is called the Multiply Podcast, which is David and I do that together. And every other week we release, it's about a 30-minute podcast. We talk all about leadership and discipleship. And we also talk about tasty food, which David loves. So we want to encourage you can find that on all the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud as well. And then Mark and I also do something called Better Student Ministry, which is we do a podcast where we do a deep dive into topics, and we also do training videos, which are all, you can find them all on YouTube. And every training video that we do also comes with a downloadable PDF where it has 5 discussion questions. And so these are really created out of a desire to see youth teams gather together and learn consistently, have time of engaging consistently. So these are 10-minute videos. So every month you can gather your team, you can hang out, watch one of these videos, and have conversation. And so those are all available for you for free, no cost. We just want those to be a resource for you. So I want to encourage you, hey, get those into your routine. Of course, there's a ton of other resources as well out there and available for you guys. So
you guys look so tan in that picture.
I know.
You guys look transparent today compared to that.
It's true. That was taken in the summertime.
Yeah. Obviously.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much for being a part of this. We've had some great comments come in of the awesome time. We've enjoyed being with you guys, even though it's been digitally and through a camera. And hope you guys are blessed. We look forward to seeing you very soon. And let's keep going and making disciples.